Hello, friends. Good to be back with you. You know, it's a lot of fun to learn new things when you're in your 90s, or any age really. And I just learned the other day, much to my surprise, that there is a Rosie the Riveter National Museum. I'd never heard of that, but there is such a museum in Richmond, California, to honor the 6 million women who went to the munitions factories during World War II to help build ships and airplanes, taking the place of the 16 million men who were called into military service. Now, all of us back then, of course, knew that poster, Rosie the Riveter. She was a real person. We remember, and if you have never seen it, look it up, her direct, determined gaze, her rolled up sleeve showing a very muscular arm, a clenched fist, and a bandana holding her hair back so it didn't get caught in machinery, and her statement, "We can do it." Yes, we pondered that poster, at least us young women. There was so little, actually, that teenagers could do to help. And we wanted to help because we knew the only way to stop the cancerous, murderous invasion of the fascist forces threatening the whole world, we all needed to help in any way we could. We were under 18, so we couldn't go into any military forces or branches. What we could do was help collect scrap metal and rubber. I remember us doing that. We could be part of war bond and war stamp drives so people would loan to the government. Some of us signed up for home nursing courses offered by the Red Cross, so more nurses could be released to help in the war with the soldiers. We worked in our victory gardens. I've described those to you before, growing as much fresh food as we could. And of course, extra help at home. Both all the maids, the cooks, housekeepers, gardeners were off working in the munitions factories or armed forces. So we learned how to cook, how to make our beds, how to wash dishes, how to mow the lawn, all that stuff. And at school, I remember they wanted us to keep very aware as students of what was going on. For example, in history class, we were given a project. We were to do research on some special aspect of the world situation, the war, and write an essay. I remember I wrote one and did some research, quite a lot of it, on what the French government in exile was trying to do to get back to France and wipe out the fascist forces who had taken over France. The Free French, they call themselves. Also, I remember, and I don't know if this was nationwide or statewide or countywide, there was some kind of contest at one point. A big airplane that had just been made, put together by women, I assume, that had not yet chosen a name. And we students were invited to suggest names for that airplane. The one I sent in as a possibility wasn't chosen, of course. There were thousands of us doing this. But I chose the words from the national anthem, "The home of the brave." The home of the brave. And I found myself thinking a lot about bravery, courage. what exactly was it? I knew I was personally scared of a lot of things. Did that mean I was devoid of any bravery or courage? Slowly I learned that courage does not consist of lack of fear, but rather what to choose to do, how to respond and act in the midst of fear. I thought of those young men sitting in that airplane that we were trying to name, maybe parachuters, to be dropped in enemy territory behind the lines. And every one of them knew the grim possibilities. They were realistic, they knew it, they were appropriately scared, but they did it anyway. I thought also of Rosie, the millions of Rosies building these planes and ships. They were doing dangerous work in heavy machinery that before then had been considered only work for men, preferably strong men, not women's work at all. They were not only in a different way of life than they'd ever been in before, they were in constant danger from that machinery. One moment of neglect, forgetfulness, you could be blinded by a spark as you riveted. You could lose a hand. They had to be alert all the time, and these factories were open 24 hours a day, and they would go in different shifts. So you'd get your 8 hours sleep and then start to work again, whether night or day. Courage. They knew the risks. They acted anyway, being filled with a purpose greater than fear. These are the faces of the brave. 2 weeks ago, I shared with you thoughts about fear. Fear, the favorite tool of tyrants. Fear like smokescreen or toxic fog that tries to blind you from your memory of reality and clarity. Fear that can paralyze on the one hand or drive you like panicked cattle herds in the wrong direction on the other hand. Now, the bravery, the courage, as we face the fog, the smoke, the panic, or the paralysis, the courage that can remember reality and clarity and truth. Not only remember, but witness to it and joins hands. Maybe right now you're thinking of somebody, either personal in your own life or somebody you heard of in national or international life, who is fully aware of the great real risks and danger and feels natural human fear, but lit within by a shining purpose greater than the fear that enables them to move into the unknown. It was over 60 years ago that our family visited the life-sized replica of that famous old sailing ship, the Mayflower, which is anchored in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and sailed. It's an old story. Most of you know it pretty well, but I think of it a lot. 1620, 400 years ago. This small ship, 102 passengers, 30 members of crew, 74 of these passengers were men, women, and children fleeing very real religious persecution in England. They were crowded together in this tiny ship. I remember when I went down to the lower deck, where most of them had to live, sleep, eat, the tiny amount allotted to each family where you had to live right cheek by jowl with each other. No windows. The light and air came from open hatches, which of course had to be closed down during a storm. And it was a stormy period. They finally, after many setbacks, set sail in September. It was a 3-month voyage right through the equinox, autumn storms. I wondered how it felt to be down on that lower deck, tossing around as the waves hit them, as the ship plowed through these massive waves. They were scared, sensibly scared, not only by the dangers of the wallowing ship, but by what faced them in an unknown land. But worst of all, they learned about halfway through that their captain and the organizers and financiers of the trip had outrageously lied to them. These pilgrims, these settlers, had been told they were being sent to Virginia. Now they were told, or found out, I'm not sure which, this was a lie. They were to be sent to the north, unexplored, cold, hard territory. Because these financiers and investors had bought tracts of land up in what we know now as Massachusetts, and they wanted people to settle there, to start bringing produce to send back to the old world so the financiers could profit. And they had not told them. And instead, now they realized, instead of landing in Virginia, where winters are kind and planting is easy, and people already there, colonies, little towns to welcome them, to give them shelter, to help them feed themselves at first. They were not landing there. They were landing in the bleak, unexplored north. Savage winters, too late in the year to plant anything, and nobody there to welcome them, greet them, give them shelter, give them food. They were dumped on this cold, uninviting coast, lied to. Realizing this, not knowing really what dangers and starvation and illness they would face, instead of despairing, they got together on November 11, 1620, and made what is known as the Mayflower Covenant, a mutual pledge to stand by each other, sustain each other, and this is fascinating, establish a self-governing democratic body politic, something new in the colonies, and which later on they think, experts think, was the foundation of the United States Constitution 150 years later. Well, you're probably already seeing this allegory. When our ship of state, our nation, wallowing in storms, conflicts of every kind, lied to consistently by our captain, our president, and his henchmen in order for their profit and their ambition. When this is finally over, the worst, when we finally established, I pray, men and women of honor to guide this ship of state, what will the land be like when we first reach the shore? It will be a very different America from what we're used to. We will have landed in a place where the world distrusts us as no longer a benevolent giant that could be counted on to reinforce democracy or to reach out to the hungry and needy of the world. We've lost the world's trust. We're aware we will face financial wounds. We're well aware we will inherit deeply damaged healthcare systems. We will land very aware that there's some way we've got to bring justice to citizens, immigrants, the government experts fired by the thousands for political reasons. We're aware this is going to be difficulties, dangers ahead of us. But nevertheless, I think we know that many of us are making in our hearts, our communities, our relationships, a compact, a covenant. In the midst of our fears and awareness that nevertheless, in the words of the great Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg, we hereby firmly resolve that this government of the people, by the people, and for the people may not perish from this earth. Thank you for being with me. I'll see you next week.